Hey, everybody. So on Sunday, we began a series of messages called Being the BFF People Need. And we started by walking with Jesus as he was a friend to people in desperate situations. We walked through Luke chapter 8 together, where Jesus encounters two people who are desperate, in desperate need of a friend, of someone to be in their corner. One of them is a man by the name of Jairus. He's a leader in the synagogue, and his 12-year-old daughter, his only child, is about to die. She's very sick. We don't know with what, but she was very sick, and she was about to die. The other is with a woman who approaches him from behind. We don't know her name, but we know she had had a medical issue for 12 years and had basically gone bankrupt trying to pay someone to heal her, a doctor, a physician, someone had gone bankrupt. She was likely ostracized, likely very alone. And Jesus in Luke chapter 8 encounters both of these people within a very short period of time. And we just walked with Jesus and said, what kind of friend is Jesus? How does he treat these two people, these two situations, when he encounters them? How does he react? What are his traits, his character, his value? What kind of a friend is Jesus to people in desperate situations? Ultimately, what we said about Jesus was that Jesus was the kind of friend who was quick to respond. He allowed himself to be interrupted. He walked with people through their pain. And he knew something very important. He knew that death wasn't final. I was reminded of friendship when I was spending some time in Scripture this week, and I'd gotten to the book of Philippians. And in Philippians chapter 1, I read this in the early portion of Philippians, and it reminded me to think about my friends and how I am as a friend. Paul writes this in Philippians chapter 1, starting in verse 3. He says, I give thanks to my God for every remembrance of you, always praying with joy for all of you in my every prayer, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. I am sure of this, that he who started a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Now, it doesn't sound like he's mentioning a friend topic specifically, but Paul is writing to people who were good friends of his, who had supported him in ministry. He writes later in Philippians that he is grateful for their support, that they were some of the first and most eager to support him in his work. And these are people who are good friends of the Apostle Paul. And he is writing back and he is saying, I am so grateful for you. Every time I pray, I remember you. I remember our partnership in the gospel. I remember how far we have come as friends together, united in this ministry work. And that got me thinking a little bit about friends that I have had throughout my time in ministry, people who have partnered with me, supported me, that I too often fail to be grateful for. In the words of Paul, that I'm not very good at remembering them every time I pray, and to pray with joy and kind of this attitude of gratefulness because of their friendship and their partnership in the ministry and what they mean to me and have meant to me. So I started to write down names of people who have been friends of mine throughout ministry, who partnered with me, if you will, in the gospel, who worked alongside of me and were such good friends along the way. And so here's kind of what I want to encourage you to do. I want to share with you a couple of their names and a couple of their stories, and I want to encourage you to do the same. I want to encourage you to take out a piece of paper and begin to write down names of people who have been friends to you, who have supported you, who have walked with you, who have been there with you. Those kinds of friends who were, allowed themselves to be interrupted. They were quick to respond. Those kinds of people, these friends who were like Jesus to you in a time that you needed it the most. And I want you to pray the prayer that Paul prays, a prayer of joy and gratitude that God has brought those people into your life for a specific season. Maybe they're still in your life, But maybe devotionally, we just pray and thank God for those he has brought into our lives along the way who have been Christ-like friends to us. And so today I was reminded of Steve Lapine and Mike Hostetter. Steve Lapine and Mike Hostetter were two of the elders at the very first church that I was a full-time staff member of, coming right out of Bible college and not having a clue what I was doing. I had never heard of a board meeting, what to do, how to lead. I mean, just completely clueless. And Steve Lapine and Mike Hostetter were some of my best friends. They were my best friends in that season of ministry in that little church in Milan, Missouri, that I am so grateful that I had the time there because of what I learned in that time. But Steve and Mike were two of the guys who were right there in my corner, walking with me and saying, "Hey, let's try to grow. Let's try to take ground. What can we do?" And they were some of the wisest guys that I've ever been around, and some of the greatest friends that I've ever had. And I often think about them fondly because of the way they put their lives on hold to say, "Hey, let's work hard together in the ministry," and the work that they did alongside of me there in Milan, Missouri. And I am so grateful for Steve and for Mike. I think about my second ministry in Petersburg, Illinois. This one was a longer ministry. It was a more difficult ministry. But man, I had some great memories from there. I learned so much, and the people, so many of the people were so fantastic and such good friends to me and to my wife through that season. But a couple that really come to mind are a couple of guys who just seemed to be in my corner no matter what. They were quick to respond when we were going through difficult seasons. They allowed themselves to be interrupted. They would drop work. They would drop whatever they were doing to show up, to be a part, to say, what do we do now? What's next? And so I want to share a couple of their names with you in light of what Paul writes in Philippians, that I am grateful for them and I remember them in joy. One of them is a guy by the name of Harry Shirting. Harry was a farmer and just an all-around great guy. Harry was one of those guys who I still hear the principles he would share with me when I was ministering there, that he would say. I can still hear the words ringing in my mind. He was one of the first to really push on me this idea that nobody really cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I didn't get it at the time. Don't tell him. But I didn't get it at the time. But as I've grown and gotten a little bit older, I'm starting to get it. And I understand what he was saying and what he was trying to get at. I wish I'd gotten it 15 years sooner, but I'm finally starting to get it, Harry. And I am so grateful for his times with over coffee and encouragement and prayer. I mean, Harry was just such a strong friend and a godly man. And I'm so grateful for Harry. And then a couple other elders and just men in the church along the way through some difficult seasons. I think of Mark Christensen. I think of Kevin Dietert. Kevin Dietert has since passed away and gone to be with Jesus. I think about Kevin often, but I don't remember him enough in joy and in my prayer. But I remember Kevin. And how he fought faithfully alongside of us in that ministry. I think about Edmund Carley, who would show up. He lived down the street, so he was close. It wasn't a big town, but Edmund Carley would show up no matter what, quick to respond, there when needed, allowed himself to be interrupted. And the most amazing thing about these men, Harry and Mark and Kevin and Edmund, one of the most amazing things about these guys was that they weren't in full-time ministry. They had families. They had regular jobs. They lived a life just like everybody else. They had lives, but yet when it came to the question of the church and the gospel and the ministry work that we were trying to accomplish there, they were so quick to respond, to be a partner in the ministry. And I think back often to those years, and I am so grateful for those guys. Their faces come to my mind, and I think about them, and I'm grateful for them. And not only talking about the BFFs on Sunday morning, but But then getting into Philippians chapter 1 and Paul being reminded of people who were with him and friends with him and partnered with him in ministry and remembering them fondly, remembering them in his prayers with joy, just kind of got me going down a list of names of people that I'm grateful for, who were good friends of mine and still are good friends of mine, who partnered with us in ministry, who I need to do a better job being more grateful for and remembering them with joy in my prayers even more often. And so those are a couple of the guys along the way in my life who really kind of came alongside and were just really good friends in ministry. They were Christ-like friends to me. So here's what I want you to do. Maybe along the way, as we've been going through this, you've been writing down some names, you've been reminded of people, maybe you're even getting a little bit emotional thinking about that one time, that one friend, and how they showed up and how they were a Christ-like friend. And maybe a practical thing for you out of this is to follow the example of Paul and to reach out to them and say, I'm grateful for you. And we don't do that often enough. We usually think about that after it's too late. Oh, I really should have said. I really should have told them how much this meant. So I would encourage you to reach out to someone this week and say, thank you for being a good friend. Thank you for how you've partnered with me. Thank you for how you came alongside of me in this season. Whatever your story is, I'd encourage you to reach out to those people and just tell them thank you. And then spend some time in prayer and say, God, what is it that you have of me? What do you hear God saying to you now as we just read a little bit of Philippians, as we talk about being a good friend, a Christ-like friend? What do you hear God saying to you? What next step do you need to take to be that kind of a friend to someone else? Maybe write down the name of someone you know who is struggling or going through some stuff, and maybe you've been really busy and it's hard to get there, and you need to take time, that you need to be quick to respond, that you need to be allow yourself to be interrupted, that you need to maybe walk with them through some pain, whatever it might be. Maybe write down their name, begin praying for them, and then reach out. And ultimately, we know that Jesus is the best kind of friend because he defeats death. So maybe the best thing you can do as a friend this week is to share Jesus with someone. There are so many people who have so many questions right now, and they don't know what the answer is, and they're wrestling through life, and they're struggling. There's so many things going on in the world, and maybe the best way you can be a friend this week to someone is to share Jesus with them, the one who defeats death, the one who has victory over sin and death. And maybe you need to be praying about that person and that name and say, God, give me the boldness to just obey you and share my story and tell my friend what it is that you're doing in my life. My hope and prayer for you this week is that each of us will grow in being the BFF people need, that we will be great friends, Christ-like friends to people who are in desperate situations, that we will walk with them through their pain, that we will be quick to respond, that we will allow ourselves to be interrupted, and that ultimately in all things we will always point people to Jesus. May you have an awesome week, and may you be a good friend to someone today.